Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to the Hoon, where co-host Peter Bale and I go around the week's news in geopolitics and Aotearoa's political economy with a whole bunch of experts, academics and politicians, all to understand our worlds better and have some fun. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome in, everyone. This is the second to last Hoon of the year. I am co-host Bernard Hickey with co-host Peter Bale over there in Tamaki Makaurau. Peter, how are you?
I'm all right, Bernard, thank you. I've actually been incredibly pissed off this week about various things, and I thought I might take it out on you and our audience a little bit, but now I'm much calmer.
Let it all wash over you. Oh,
I'm much calmer than I was, and I've been telling you about some of the things. So apologise to everybody for not being here last week, although there's various people I can imagine who would have preferred me not to be here. Would in fact prefer me not to have survived my 4-hour
We're very
operation.
pleased to have you back.
Yeah.
And glad to hear that you got through the general anaesthetic and you're back with all the nerves
and verve and
Yep.
But it was funny, Bernard, if I may, just because somebody last week, a couple of weeks ago, complained that we were doing too much chat at the beginning. And if they listen to some of the leading podcasters we do, there's always a little bit of chat, but ours isn't bollocks, actually. Ours is always good. When I woke up from the anaesthetic, apart from my friend who's a very good ENT surgeon being there to look after me, who's retired now, but I looked out on One Tree Hill, where I grew up, at the hill at Mangakiakia, and it was so beautiful to look at that and think about all sorts of nice things and be incredibly well cared for by the public health system and Green Lane Hospital. And I'm very, very grateful for them. But I have to go back and do the other one. You know, when we used to cover oil companies like BHP, Ben, there's that expression with an oil well where you're reaming out the rat hole. That is essentially. I love making you laugh. That is essentially what they did. They had to ream out my rat hole of this year, and then in a couple of months I have to have this year done. But it's not because I'm getting old. It's just because I've been a young, active New Zealander and swum a lot. But what have you been up to, Bernard?
Well, I haven't had my rat holes reamed out, or I haven't reamed out anyone else's rat holes. But I have.
Jesus,
I have asked.
Steady on that might be a bit. That might be a bit sexual, Bernard. Is that?
No.
But you never get
medical.
ratty with other people.
No. I certainly enjoyed going to Wellington on Wednesday morning to ask some questions of the new Reserve Bank Governor, Anna Brayman. We had a good chat beforehand. I encouraged her to go to the cricket at the Basin Reserve, which is going on at the moment.
Sorry, did you just see me roll my eyes there for a moment? Yeah.
No,
I asked you, is she a silly mid-on or a safe pair of hands?
She is a very orthodox opening bats person. She knows how to do a forward defensive.
Of a test or a not? She wouldn't be too well.
No. She would never do the T20s. Right? No, she's not T20. She is test playing, and not in the English team either. Not Bazball. She is a test playing opening bat who will have scored 3 runs after the first 100 balls, because every ball will be very carefully watched.
Will it be a googly?
She's not the bowler. She's the bats.
I know. But who's going to wash the ball? Who's going to wash the balls, as we say, and who's going to bring the sandpaper to the balls?
That's a good question about the sandpaper and monetary policy.
Yeah.
I tried to bowl a few googlies, but she negotiated them very well.
Yeah.
But she had her first session in front of the journalists and was watched very closely. I think she might have been a bit surprised at how much attention there is now on this whole interest rate thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
you mean worldwide, or you mean just in New Zealand?
In New Zealand.
Is that because of the Westpac, this kind of Westpac blip?
That's true. And also because the government really has bet the farm, well, the house, on growing the economy through the housing market. And the one way to do that, according to the government, is to lower interest rates. And she is a key player in that strategy, whether she likes it or not. And she understandably said that she enjoyed independence, but also that, she also respected the independence of the government and the need to serve the politicians and
Yep,
the
yep. Well,
legislation
no,
that
no,
she
no, no. I
has.
bet she did not say serve the politicians.
No,
I
she
bet she
served
said
the
recognise
Reserve
the
Bank
politicians.
Act.
Absolutely. So, Bernard, you're again, as so often, doing your soliloquy early. So we're gonna sort of close the show before the skateboarding
Sure,
dog with
sure,
the
sure.
soliloquy about interest rates and so on. And I'm not going to do any Swedish chef jokes or mention IKEA, other than just having mentioned IKEA. But
She
I'm
was
sure,
asked about IKEA,
yeah,
yeah,
of
and you
course
could
she
see
was.
she wasn't thrilled about it. Yeah,
Fucking hell. I know. But I could actually get out of my wallet my IKEA family my card that I have from Spain. And I will definitely be going to IKEA to buy towels and various other things. Now, as a bit of therapy, Bernard, I got really pissed off this week by the reaction to my piece in the Listener about political discourse. And I just want to...
but can't you take a bigger view here and say it was noticed? It
Well, no,
created
absolutely.
debate.
No, I totally agree. What really struck me was one of the liberal people who reacted to it, and it made me think of South Pacific, the Rogers and Hammerstein
Right.
film.
Yeah.
Whereas there's nothing like a dame, nothing in the world. There's nothing you can name that is anything like a dame. But apart from that kind of thing, I had fascists essentially who I interviewed faithfully, telling me that I had done fake news and made up quotes, and it was quite shocking. So I think possibly I have to nail my colours to a little bit closer to the mast than I have so far. Shall we go into what we got on the show today with Dr. Catherine? We have a surfeit, or not so much a surfeit. We have a multitude of doctors today, doctors and professors. We've got Dr. Catherine Dyer. Bernard, what she's going to talk about?
To talk about climate, and in particular the new US foreign policy, which I think this show today will give us a really forensic look at a document which most New Zealanders haven't heard of, but I think is important and shocking in a way. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about misinformation, disinformation in a week where, for the first time, an entire country really pushed back at big tech in a way that they didn't like, which was Australia's under 16 ban on social media.
Which I don't agree with, but we can talk about that too, Bernard. But good. Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
And then we'll finish out the show with my soliloquy wrapping together monetary and fiscal policy ahead of next week's Haifu, the half-yearly
No, we
economic
still have
and
a
fiscal
have a
update.
skateboarding dog, even though the odd person hates our skateboarding dogs, and we try to
Never read
carry
the
on.
comments. Yep. Yeah. So that's going to be a cracking show. And remember, this is the second to last show of the year. Last show of the year, we'll have some special guests and some rappy uppy sort of action, and also
And some
our
excellent
picks.
last minute Christmas gift. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to talk about Christmas. Last minute holiday gifts. Fucking Tommy Robinson, that little fascist shit from England, is now doing this "there is no Christmas" bullshit. For the holidays, we'll have some Yuletide gifts. Anyway,
See, this is why
Yuletide gift suggestions, rather.
Yeah. No, this is why I enjoy not being part of the Twitter sphere. My life is so much better without it. And whenever I go to a cemetery these days, I look at the headstones, and they'll have something interesting on them.
Did not die
like,
thinking of his tweet for his
That's right.
gravestone.
You just looked at the gravestone. You think, on my gravestone, it will not say he wished he'd spent more time on Twitter. And
the one I always loved was, I think it was was it John Lemazurier or Spike Milligan who said, "I told you I was ill."
No, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
So, Bernard, we got Catherine Dyer, and then we're going to devote pretty much the show after Catherine Dyer, Dr. Catherine Dyer, to Professor Robert Patman, and what I just realised rather alarmingly, but I think I did note, Dr. Sanjana Hatatua, who is a noted expert in social sciences and disinformation and misinformation, and has, in a sense, been banished from New Zealand, and we'll talk to him about that. We're going to blend. He's coming in from Sri Lanka. We're going to blend the international and domestic sections that we normally do to some extent to talk about this national security strategy. We'll get from Professor Patman the broad brush of it, because I do think our audience, being incredibly clever, are very good at this. But Sanjana will help us bring it back locally about how dangerous it is and how risky it is. And then you're going to close out with a fudge recipe, I believe, Bernard.
I will certainly have fudge.
Yeah.
And show fudge.
Excellent. And I will also
but won't fudge.
I'll put into the show links the Yuletide Palestinian pistachio and almond cookies that I made from the Sami Tamimi cookbook this week, which were bloody sensational.
Have you saved any
a friend
for me?
of mine described them as interesting, which made me very worried. So, Dr. Dyer.
Catherine, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Lovely to see you. On the second to last show of the year, we are trying to get our heads around what America now thinks of the world and this extraordinary foreign policy statement, which hasn't got nearly enough attention in Aotearoa, because it says some outrageous things about the climate and gives you a sense of how the world's largest economy and the world's largest CO2 emitter, at least in nominal total terms, thinks of the world right now. Catherine, what's going on with America's view of the world?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting read, isn't it? Even just the language in it. I mean, I do a lot of research around narratives and framing and stuff like that. And the language, usually when you look at these kind of reports, there's quite bureaucratic and serious sounding language. And you get a lot of Trumpian language in this one, which is, it's hard not to cackle while you're reading it, so the main bit that pertained to directly to climate change anyway, there were lots of other places where it kind of, pertained to it indirectly, but directly was under their energy strategy. And they talked about the disastrous climate change and net zero ideologies.
Ideologies, exactly. Not that climate change is a fact, it's ideologies.
Yeah, and I was, in the back of my head, I was kind of thinking it would be really great to see Trump challenge the ideology of gravity from a really tall Trump building.
Well, but it's not as tall as not as tall as he told everybody that it was. So you'd probably still be splattered on a New York taxi like that.
Just
famous
marginally less splattered than you perhaps thought you should have been. Yeah.
Sorry.
Or less quickly, but
again.
Still, you'd get there. So there was that bit about the ideologies and in particular talking about how they'd harmed Europe, which, was particularly ironic in light of the fact that Europe's reliance on Russian gas has probably been the most substantial harm that's happened to them in recent times. And so, less reliance on fossil fuels might have put them in a better situation, certainly in that context. But also talked about those, about climate change and net zero ideologies being a threat to the US and that they subsidise their adversaries. And so, and in some, there's some ways you can look at that where you can kind of say, well, certainly you can see advantages for China in the transition to, to renewable energies, partly because China has never had, a high level of access to fossil fuels, which is necessary if you want to project your power into the world, or it has been in recent decades. And so that transition, in a lot of ways, you can see why it benefits China more than the US. But at the same time, climate change is happening. Like, you can't just decide to reject it as an ideology and expect that can, you can get,
It's only going to affect shithole countries, Catherine. We know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it is already having such high impacts on the US, in terms of deaths from heat, the damages from fire and, extreme weather events and so on. So, it's interesting, but I can see how trying to get their hands on as much fossil fuels as possible in the very short term gives you some military advantages in the world.
Isn't it interesting? But Catherine, so you saw it in very... I mean, I would have thought that you would read that document and almost sort of go and have a lie down for a while and wonder whether your entire life's work was worthwhile, in a sense. And of course, clearly it is. But it
I have
was
that
like
daily
it was
lie
like
down in the
watching
afternoon.
it was like watching an episode of The Man in the High Castle, where you just think only of your own interests, and the US has already been divided between, you know, the areas with the oil and the areas with not. And we've got this reinterpretation, which we'll talk a little bit about with Robert Patman shortly, of the Monroe Doctrine, which is all about oil.
Yeah, and about, you know, very short-term interests. But the other thing that was interesting about the way they talked about oil was they, you know, almost in the same sentence when they were talking about the African continent, for instance, they were talking about, you know, trying to ensure that they had access to fossil fuel resources, but also so that they could extend their dominance in the future for critical minerals and other things like that, which of course are very important for the renewable energy transition.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit of incoherency there. And it's like we keep seeing with policy in New Zealand, there's this really, really strong short-term focus as if future generations don't exist or won't have any needs.
Well, they may not. They won't be voting next year, those future generations. So, Catherine, because let me bring that. Tell us what you think. Your perspective this week, both from this report, but just generally, and the other things we've seen that I think they're putting through. The government is putting through the methane restrictions through urgency. This is your was it soft? I always forget. Your soft reneging or slow reneging is becoming a pretty clear reneging, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty clear reneging, but they're still not officially admitting to the fact that, you know, or Simon Watts is still not officially admitting that they are not going to achieve Paris Agreement targets, and I think that's for very obvious reasons. Yeah, they're hoping to be able to keep, so you know that other countries won't have us up on it, and they'll take a wait and see approach, and you know, until 2030, which seems, you know, a tad reckless.
And I do wonder whether they're just hoping that no one calls bullshit on them. And there's a part of me actually that would just like to launch a website that says, I call bullshit.
Oh, excellent. I just registered it.
Luxon
is 55. Yeah. Luxon's 55. So 2030. Oh, he's fucked. Sorry, he's going to be my age, and you know, he's absolutely fucked. Sorry.
Yeah. And this is the thing. Part of our role, and I hope the part of the role of a bunch of independent media people is to say, you've said this. This is what it means. It clashes with what you've previously said, what you currently promise. I call bullshit. And it's you know, about time actually we saw a bit more of that, not just from the, you know, the fourth estate, but the people in business and in the business community and in the financial community, the funds managers, the insurers, the reinsurers, who actually do employ actuaries and believe in science and understand how science affects balance sheets and profit and loss in the long run, and shouldn't brook any of this bullshit, and it needs to be called out.
I completely agree. It's past time that we really started to seriously push back, because it's, you know, we all have longer term futures in mind, for ourselves or for our, you know, future generations.
For me anymore. I just bought a new petrol powered car the other day. So carry on.
But it's very old and will harden to run.
True.
We're also talking you know, like there's a few of us in the academic world that are talking about potentially the truth about everything kind of a conference, maybe mid next year, where we're sort of saying we really need to get some hard truths out there, and we need to start to have more conversations that are more firmly based or grounded in reality, rather than this, you know, the stuff which is, you know, it is formative of narratives and of discourse which kind of become our lived realities, even though we know that they're not right, and we do seriously need to stand up against that and to push back a little more firmly and try to get more grounded, real conversations happening about what we need to be doing and about where we actually are. What are the things?
It is
what are
tough
the
to
risks in front of us?
It is tough to break through the noise, though, when so much of our media has become about entertainment, debate,
God, Bernard.
conflict, rather than information and understanding. Emotion trumps information
Trumps
every time.
Yeah.
Can I just suggest that we bring in Sanjana and Robert, who are in the
Absolutely.
green room waiting, having
Go
their
for it.
gins. They're all having their virtual gins and tonics. Sanjana, it's so good to see you. Robert, we've got Catherine. One of the reasons I brought you in to do this Brady Bunch kind of presentation for a moment is that one of our audience, who I think I know used to have a different identity, said Bernard absolutely hates it when I look at the, because sometimes I do want to slip my wrists after looking at our own commentary, but someone says Chill Pill 2VD, who I think I know who it is from their previous work. Why is it always the United States that's guilty in everything? How is Europe doing in climate emissions so far? What about India, China, Japan, etc.? So let me just read you a tiny thing from that national security strategy. We will do a moment of proper introduction to Professor Patman and Dr. I don't think we've ever had so many bloody properly qualified academics. But there
Except
is
for us, Peter.
a line in the national security strategy. Yeah, well, certainly except for me, because I'm a fucking idiot savant. Not even a savant, I'm just an idiot. So dear Chill Pill V2D, what makes the difference is that even in this ridiculous national strategy document, someone can say what differentiates America from the rest of the world is our openness, transparency, trustworthiness, commitment to freedom and innovation, and free market capitalism. It will continue to make us the global partner of first choice. So can I just, Bernard, I don't know whether that person is a subscriber of yours, but like a couple of others lately, I've been wanting to tell them to fuck off, basically. Now, may I welcome, Catherine, thank you so much. You can stay on if you want, but Dr. Sanjana Hatotawa, who is joining us from, I think, Colombo, or are you in Gaul?
No, I'm
We're-
Colombo.
In Colombo. And Professor Robert Patman, who's joining us from a slightly less exotic place in Dunedin. Although I was on a Helen Clark thing today, and I hear Dunedin's booming, Robert, thanks to your vast real estate portfolio.
Of one property.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing what a
Sanjana-
difference one can make.
Yeah. So if you would forgive me for calling you Sanjana rather than Dr. Hatatua, and Robert, may I call you Robert? Well, we've been through this once
course,
before about
Peter,
Bobby.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah, and nice to see you, Sanjana, and great to see you, Bernard.
Yeah.
Good to see you, everybody.
So we're going to devote most of the rest of the show, even if that person objects to it, to a discussion about the international and domestic implications of this national security strategy document, which is a 39-page thing from the White House, which contains essentially information about the Great Replacement Theory, transactional ideas or transactional ideas about Taiwan and various other things. So, Professor Patman, would you outline your views of the implications globally and then back to New Zealand for this 29-page, I have to check, document of the National Security Strategy of the United States for us, please?
Well, I think there's a number of takeaways. Firstly, the document emphasizes the importance of American dominance in the Western Hemisphere. In addition, it indicates that it wants to diminish its involvement in the Middle East. Thirdly, it berates Europe, and by implication says that it will support populist right-wing forces in European politics. And fourthly, it indicates as a general foreign policy approach what it calls flexible realism.
Which requires a significant amount of bending forward, I suspect.
I think you're the person who wrote in earlier. One thing you have to keep into account when you're looking at the Trump administration is that the gulf between declaratory policy and substantive policy. And I think in many respects...
But one second, Rob. Are you saying this is not declarative policy?
It is declaratory policy, and it does, but it's no shock. I mean, this is basically... This document has formalised what's been apparent since about late January of this year. And it indicates, as we've spoken about this many times before on the Hoon, Mr. Trump's vision of international relations. I think some people thought I was just on an anti-Trump rant. I kept saying to both Peter and Bernard, Mr. Trump's view of international relations is hierarchical. And in the document, he explicitly spells this out. He says he wants to see the formation of a new international group consisting of, the C5, Russia, China, United States,
want to make that
India,
C stand for, but it's
and Japan.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's basically it confirms the most radical departure in U.S. foreign policy in the post-45 period. And some might say, critics might say, it probably institutionalizes the post-American era. America seems to be much more sympathetic to authoritarian states than to many of its liberal democratic allies. And indeed, as we've said before, the document basically signals it's going to intensify its support for those forces, particularly in Europe, which it claims are being repressed, such as AfD and the Reform Party.
Poor babies.
Yeah. These terrible victimhood projects that have been going on for so long. And of course, Mr. Trump's old friend in the Kremlin, Mr. Putin, he's a comrade in arms. And the most nice thing about, well, not nice thing, there's a certain symmetry about this, is that Mr. Peskov, Mr. Putin's express spokesman, has confirmed
I think we can use the word lackey.
Yeah. Well paid lackey, though. In addition, Peskov said, amongst other things, that this vision aligns with Russian foreign policy priorities.
Which is the sort of, it's again, as we so often see, it's saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
It's
but I
just
mean,
you
can almost hear
actually.
the congratulations and the applause in the Kremlin. Our boy has delivered. There was absolutely ecstatic scenes in Moscow when Trump got re-elected, and now Putin can say all that support for Mr. Trump has paid off. He's delivering. And I mean, most European states
Robert, someone's
know...
just asking, let me just interrupt you just a tiny bit, because I also want to bring... So the C5 that Trump is talking about, they're the countries with more than, I think, 100 countries, not, of course, the European Union. It is China, Russia, the United States, India, Japan. Yeah, so the 100 million countries can come into the C5, and the rest of us are fucked. Now, that's the 6th time, I think. People are counting how many times I've spoken. So let me just flick briefly to Dr. Hatatua, because Sanjana, and I'm going to ask Robert this question as well. You're very good at working out what the conversational, discursive implications of this kind of language being used so widely might be in New Zealand. Would you like to have a little go at that, please? Is that all right with you, Bernard?
Well,
no?
Yeah. I mean, where do you start? I just want to say, though, that one thing that, and Robert might want to chip in on this, is that for me, the NSS is, there's a clear line between Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation and the NSS. I don't think many have cottoned on to it. Certainly not to the degree that I would have liked to see it. But in that sense, Robert, I completely agree with you that it isn't surprising, but it is still very worrying that the declarative intent now is formalizing what was once the most feared realization, or the potential realization of Project 2025. I just want to put it out there, Robert, you're the expert on this. With regards to Aotearoa, hey, listen, I mean, there is a rising far right, particularly under this government. You might have different takes on it as to why that is the case, but there is a vacuum, there's a void of political leadership that is being filled by the far right, and that is evident in everything that I study. One doesn't need to get into the weeds about it.
Oh no, we do. We really do. We're going to. We're going to. But we'll we're going to give Robert some space to carry on.
In that, though, there is very, very clearly networks in the country, one of which puts out a weekly. Well, there is a weekly podcast that I listen to, with some degree of interest.
The Hoon,
the network
you mean?
puts out podcasts on a. No, not the Hoon. You'll want to take that back when I go on to say what it actually does put out. The F word is the least of our concerns with what it puts out. And what it puts out on every Friday is a podcast with two individuals who essentially promote and normalize what Brenton Tarrant put out in his manifesto. And that's really, I think I need to say that very clearly. Because academics like to kind of couch all of this.
Just do this one quickly, because I'm going to come back to you on this one, and we may, but do that one quickly, please.
In all sorts of highfalutin language, but actually what they put out is what the Christchurch terrorist included in his manifesto, which is banned in New Zealand, but academics like myself have studied it an inordinate amount of times. And essentially what the NSS does is it gives life and feel to people who are promoting this inside of Aotearoa, who are New Zealanders. And that's extraordinary, because you've never had a compatibility of declarative American foreign and domestic policy with, in March 2019, what was extremist, fringe, violent extremism and lunacy. And the fact that you can talk about it in the same sentence, in the same breath, is quite extraordinary and deeply worrying.
Sanjana, that is the most interesting. Thank you so much for that. And the only reason I digress from it slightly is that I want to come back to that, because I started the session with Bernard complaining about the number of people who had beaten me over the head. Not literally yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if it comes. But Professor Patman, could you just, because I think both of us have gone down into that document and looked at the more strategic implications, but also the diplomatic implications, because it talks very little about the Indo-Pacific as that strange term, except that it talks about New Zealand isn't mentioned, literally, but Australia needs to spend more on defence. Australia cannot have a trade deficit. We're going to rely on our allies. But it's also very transactional. The whole Taiwan conversation is transactional. What are the implications for New Zealand policy?
Well, I think the first implication of the NSS document is that it shows that the Trump administration, and this sort of reinforces the point that Sanjana's just made, this document has not come out of a clear blue sky. It has deep roots. Indeed, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Sanjana, but I do believe that manifesto that the Christchurch terrorist Brenton Tarrant wrote or published shortly before he carried out his appalling act of terrorism included praise for Trump administration. But the reason I'm stressing the deep roots of this is that it really does show the extent of the failure of liberal governments in dealing with this Trump administration. There seems to be an assumption amongst our government, amongst many other liberal governments, that a charm offensive could deflect Mr. Trump from this sort of path.
NATO calls me daddy.
Daddy diplomacy.
Yeah.
So in a sense, this document for me confirms the defeat of daddy diplomacy. And Europe in particular, and New Zealand, and many other liberal democracies now face tough choices. This document, by the way, fundamentally undermines the rationale for the Five Eyes Alliance. When that document was formed, when the Five Eyes Alliance was formed, I should say, the idea was that liberal democracies must share intelligence information to make themselves more robust against the challenge of authoritarian
because they had
states.
Common values, Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, I notice the silence from Wellington at the moment is deafening, but there has to be. I don't think we can sit on the fence on this, and at some point the government has to indicate whether it actually feels comfortable about deepening defence cooperation, if that's what's happening, with a country which is led by a far right leadership, which actually seems to have no time for multilateralism. It doesn't. That document spells out hostility.
No, the opposite of multilateralism. Multilateralism is weakness.
Yes,
Strong countries
as well
don't
as
need multilateralism.
Contempt for international institutions.
Yeah.
So New Zealand, in particular, which has been on the receiving end of a 15% tariff, needs to do some really hard thinking now about its foreign policy.
Robert, I really felt that reading. I did read all 39 pages today and did a bit of a search of it in a précis. It is so against everything that Professor Robert Patman writes about our need for international alliances and multilateralism. Right? It's a betrayal of the last 47, last 80 years, really.
All New Zealand governments in the post-45 period, out of self-enlightened interest, have believed in free trade and an international rules-based order. New Zealand's not alone in that. For if you're weak and relatively small, international rules, principles, and a strong a strong commitment to international law makes a lot of sense. But Mr. Trump has a hierarchical view where great powers run the world, despite the fact that great powers remain marginalised by problems which are too big for them to solve.
Yeah.
And they're claiming the right to run the rest of the world. This is very interesting, and it will be very interesting to see how this government in New Zealand now responds, as well as Starmer in Britain. They're all wringing their hands and privately worried, but it seems to me that it's a chance to send a message to the United States. I think many opponents of Trump in the United States are looking for many liberal democracies to express their contempt for this document and its direction.
And we need to align. Presumably they need to. But Robert, I just looked up that it was 1825, I think, when Monroe was president, which is just ridiculous. Bernard, I'm sorry.
Yes, I wondered, Sanjana, if you could talk about how those who support the president's agenda, Project 2025, are spreading the information or the themes that are in this document, and what sort of reception it's getting in places like continental Europe,
Dunedin.
the UK, where particularly the rhetoric around immigration is quite corrosive and explosive in saying that this idea that that Europe is erasing itself. I mean, how is this playing out in the debate sphere in the likes of the UK and Europe?
So very quickly, Robert, you're right in that the manifesto which I just pulled up, I hate you guys for making me pull that fucking awful document again. But I did.
Which one, the American manifesto or the Brenton Tarrant manifesto?
Well, I think it's one of the same. So I mean, but,
sorry, this is not our Christmas episode where we can do the jokes. But thank you.
This isn't. But he refers to himself. The killer refers to himself in the third person, and the question that the killer presents to himself is, "Were are you a supporter of Donald Trump?" And I quote, "As a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose, sure. As a policymaker and leader, dear God, no." So there seems to be a presentation of an embrace of Trump, but it is a qualified one. But it does track with the NSS and its forward presentation of whatever is in the document. The second thing, I mean, this is just a side, Robert. I know it struck me that the NSS doesn't have a word about climate change. I think it does, but it's seen as an ideological construct. And it occurred to me that when you said about great powers not being able to solve anything on their own, that this sets out a strategy for the United States that takes it quite apart from what the rest of the world will have to contend with and is contending with. So that does have, I think, an impact on small nation states, New Zealand's foreign policy and domestic policies as well. It just occurred to me that it's bizarre, but perhaps entirely on track. Bernard, I mean, hey, listen, I mean, I can talk till then, till the cows come home about this. It is worrying that the I'll try to make it simple, right? I mean, this rhetoric isn't new. This presentation isn't new. These ideas aren't new. There's nothing new in that sense in the NSS or in the Trump 2.0 or arguably in the first avatar of Trump in the White House. What is genuinely new is the platforming of it and the normalization of it by an incumbent president to this degree, which is historically unprecedented.
Correct. Yep.
And I think we need to say that out loud and say that very clearly, because it's sometimes taken for granted that with Trump's inanity day in and day out, that this is somehow normal. It is not normal. It is the centering of what was, as recently as a year or two ago, fringe and violent extremist ideology, unequivocally. And now you find not just a hint or a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, but an open embrace of it and an articulation of it and a forward declarative presentation of it. That is quite extraordinary, and that is what we're dealing with in New Zealand or in the European Union or anywhere else where this document is received by those it is intended to be received by as an audience with celebration, because this is everything that they've been fighting for.
Everything.
And again, this is academically what the likes of a Martin Sellner wanted. And this is the white nationalist, white supremacist guru of the far right, with
We're coming back to him in a minute.
links and,
Because I'm gonna-
and links to the Christchurch killer as well. But this is the administrative articulation from the United States of what Sellner's white supremacist violent ideology is founded upon and frames.
Yep.
And again, to just say that is an extraordinary moment in history.
Okay, Sanjana, let me just ask both you and Professor Patman a question. What if they're right? What if they're right that that 1 million Syrians arriving in Germany has changed the identity of Germany and weakened Germany, that mass immigration has ruined these once proud imperial colonialist countries? And what if they're right? What if they're right that New Zealand should... We had Shamabil Jacob on a few months ago on the Hoon, and he, in a very perceptive sense, said, maybe there are too many. I'm not sure, New Zealanders will take too many Shamabils. Is there a possibility that us somewhat lower P for progressive people are wrong, and that actually all these pseudo-fascists and right-wingers are in fact correct, that we are undermining, important parts of civilization? Sanjana, go on. Yeah, I can see you just about burning a gasket there, bursting a gasket. You go first.
No. There's an involuntary reaction to the framing of the question. There, not the asking.
Somebody.
But
One of
Robert,
our regular guests is saying I'm both siding. I'm not
go.
both siding. I think it is important, because I might be completely. I'm not both siding this. I kind of, particularly after our conversations recently and some of the shit I've gone through the last 2 weeks on a story that I actually care about, I'm not both siding this. But what if they're right? Sanjana, please.
No, Robert, I think I'll go after you.
I don't.
Because you need to
fine.
vomit first. Yeah, Robert, go
I
ahead.
don't think they're right, because the people putting forward this ideology, they like to present themselves as champions of the ordinary people. But what I've noticed about the far right, many of them are extremely rich, and their key constituencies, although they use populist rhetoric, which always says that they're acting for the ordinary people, I see no evidence that's the declaratory part, but there's no evidence of that in actual practice, the way they conduct their policies. The other thing is, they are stirring up problems. One of the things I noticed about the UK when the referendum about whether the UK should remain in Europe, you recall that the Brexiteers made a great play about how leaving Europe would enable Britain to control its borders.
Absolutely.
And but the interesting thing is, if you look down the breakdown of the Brexit vote, it wasn't areas of high immigration that that were, if you like, drivers of this process. Much of the vote for leaving the EU came from areas where there was virtually no immigration. So I don't think. And the other thing here is that, let's be quite clear, countries benefit both culturally and economically from immigrants. And so we do live in an interconnected...
Us, Robert. I mean,
sorry?
It pollutes us. I'm kidding, of course, which
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't, and somebody is accusing me of both siding, which I never do, ever.
No, but I do think this needs to be pointed out. Countries have actually sought and encouraged people to migrate there, often for economic reasons. And many of these countries, particularly in Europe, and to some extent the US, I mean, look, and America is a nation of immigrants.
Immigrants. Come on. Yeah.
I mean, if Mr. Trump was to
Some
follow
of them
his
are,
own
some of them
logic,
are
he'd
even
have to
white,
go
and
back
they
to
came
Germany.
from Germany, for Christ's sake. They're
Yes,
called
so
Trump.
this is just, I think, tinny rhetoric, and I think it needs to be challenged with the same vigour that they're putting it forward. And many of the problems we face, both within countries and outside countries, can only be fixed by international cooperation. Mr. Trump's national security doctrine has nothing to say on a whole range of problems that don't respect borders. Apparently, climate change is a hoax. Global pandemics can be wished away through American exceptionalism. Well, they tried that, and that didn't work too well, with America having more deaths from COVID-19 than anyone else. Then there's transnational terrorism. Well, that couldn't be fixed unilaterally either. And then, of course, the problems of a truly authentic global economy, which, whether we like it or not, those problems do not respect borders. So it's all very well saying 5 countries can run the world, with America calling the shots as the most powerful of this concert of great powers. But that is a fantasy as globalization continues in the 21st century. So I think, in response to that, I think they're wrong. I think they're misreading the international situation. And I think many people are so shocked by their views, they sort of are reduced to silence. And I think we need better leadership from many of the liberal democracies to contest Mr. Trump's view of the world.
I think that contestation is really... Robert, may I just move to Sanjana, because Sanjana, when I asked that question about are they right, one of our regulars said, you're both sides. It was not my intention, but, we're all being a bit too... I don't want to be too liberal about this. Tell me what your response is to that possibility that these people are right.
I don't know what being too liberal is, but I like to kind of take off from what Robert said, which is that if you're talking about political leadership that's required to answer those questions, hey, listen, immigration is a hot button emotive issue today. It's been made to be such. We're not going to wish it away, and I think that there needs to be some robust discussion around it. I was listening to the Singaporean foreign minister. He has very definite views about, and Singapore being Singapore, about immigration that doesn't track with not just this discussion, but with a lot of what my views are on immigration as well. So I think that there is a need for the discussion to take place. But just to bring it to New Zealand, I am really concerned that the individuals leading this discussion are also the same individuals who are platformed by and are very happy to appear on the same far-right networks that are essentially promoting the Christchurch killers' ideology. I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, is that
when
normal?
excusing it sometimes?
I don't know. So when you have Shane Jones saying that immigration is going to be the centerpiece of their strategy for next year's election, when you have the country's foreign minister appearing on these same platforms and talking about immigration as something that is hurtful and harmful and evil and wrong and all manner of other bombastic things, you do worry that the space for evidence, data, policy-based discussions around all of this, which is, as a democracy, I think roundly welcomed, is diminishing in New Zealand and in Europe and certainly in America and in other parts of the world.
When you say it's diminishing, Sanjana, is it because people
what Robert said is quite important, and the lack thereof, I think.
Is it because people are afraid to put their head above the parapet, though? When you say it's diminishing, is it because
it could,
or people are
I mean, I'm
seeing
sorry,
merit.
Peter. I'm sorry, Peter. There's a word called principles that to me is the bedrock of politics as I would like to see it and I understand it. And there's also another P word called populism, which has seemed to have overtaken the discussion of all of what we are talking about and its presentation in contemporary politics in New Zealand and in other parts of the world. And in that, immigration is a football. It's anything that anybody wants it to be on any day of the week that they get up with a bad hair day, and people with my skin tone and melatonin levels are the butt end of everything that is going wrong with their
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah.
For no reason that we have contributed to it. And I just want to say what Robert says is quite important. Immigration and immigrants build and develop and strengthen countries. I mean, there's the historical record of it. And so to say that it is anything other than that is to fly in the face of America's own history. And it
Yeah, of
just
course.
boggles the mind.
Okay, we'll talk more about that, Sanjana. I'm really grateful for you, Bernard.
Yes,
Don't you don't have to put your finger up. I saw your messages.
Just one final question from me to Sanjana and to Robert, actually. I've been involved in the media for 40
little
years now, 40 years now, and I have never seen the public debate more emotive, divided, short-term, ephemeral, dominated by streams of misinformation and disinformation from social media networks in a way that it seems like the networks and the technology is just way too fast and powerful for human brains and human society to handle. I'm trying to work out, how do we wrestle control of this back, if we can, to have proper debates again? Because it's almost like while our debate climate is dominated by the likes of Twitter and Facebook and all the other tools, and it is more serious than just the yellow press or what we saw with Fox News. There's something else going on here. It gets right to the bottom of
Bernard, you
to
can't do
everyone in
your full
society.
soliloquy now. Ask the question, for Christ's sake.
So the question is, how do we change this? Because at the moment it seems like a one-way trip.
Sorry, but by this you mean what? The
Yeah,
media
exactly.
landscape that you...
Yeah, was there a question in there, is what poor old Sanjana's asking?
So Sanjana, how do we make these debates more fact-based and thoughtful rather than reactionary and angry? Because the algorithms obviously sought for emotion over thought.
Yeah, hey, listen, I mean, I think we are fighting a losing battle over algorithms. So I don't think that there's an easy solution to it. In fact, I don't think there is a solution to it. Under Trump, I think there's an extraordinary photo which nobody really talks about. It's not just one photo, but when Trump's on Inauguration Day, Robert, you might remember this, the cabinet was behind the oligarchs of Silicon Valley. That's never happened before. So as a photo, that's quite a remarkable moment where you had Sundar Pichai and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Microsoft all in front of the cabinet. And to me, that the algorithmic acceleration of societal decay is a follow through of what politics and power has become in the United States. So it's not surprising that we are also part of that decay. And to fight that is impossible as individuals or as the Hoon or as Professor Patman or as Dr. Hatta.
The Hoon is incredibly
Individuals
powerful,
and
Sanjana,
small
don't worry.
networks cannot do this. I'm very happy to hear this, and I expect a revision in our media ecology tomorrow as a consequence of this podcast. But in the event that we do fail at this endeavor, I think we have to take into account that the splintering of everything that Bernard you said is there's academic foundations to it. That's going to accelerate. We haven't talked about AI. That's going to accentuate all of it. And essentially, it's, for me, men and power and white power and white supremacy that is the algorithmic expression that then corrodes all societies. So we cannot talk about an answer to what you asked purely from what you said I need to answer, which is a technological perspective. We need to go back into politics, power relations, power dynamics, gender, history, culture, colonialism, and those are the things that then need to kind of talk about and then come to an understanding that if you don't understand and address those, there's no coherent answer to what you asked.
Robert,
Could you argue, though?
Did you want to
could you
elaborate? I'm sorry, Bernard. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
Could you argue, though, that if you want to reclaim sovereignty, that you have to use the same technology to fight back, i.e., and we're unusual, New Zealand, in that we're the only place in the world, really, with a relatively few number of physical connections that can be controlled. You know, it's no surprise that Spark and 2 Degrees and what was Vodafone actually discussed on the afternoon of the Christchurch attacks, turning off Facebook and those things. That can be done.
Bernard, that's
Why
not
aren't
what
we
you
doing
have
it?
today. Sorry, Bernard, that's not what you have today. I mean, it'll go beyond the program to explain why, but that media ecology, that media information system, whatever you want to call it, that is, I want to stress, gone. It is kaput. And you cannot do what you did then, today, or ever again. So I just want to kind of, I'm sorry to say this,
No.
but it's just changed. And the second thing, sorry, Peter, is the second thing
No,
is
not
that
at all.
you can use
you
the
never have to
technology, and I
apologize.
think you should. You can use the same tech, but we are running against the headwinds of Silicon Valley oligarchs. So you will never win, or you will never have the impact that you want. And the other thing is that the far right, this is a far right ecosystem, and we are now in that.
Yeah.
And so just that recognition of what it has become, I think, should sober the expectations of what we can manage to do. Not saying that's not important. I'm not saying that social cohesion and these kinds of discussions and what all of us do in our daily lives offline, beyond the glare of social media, isn't important. But it is going to be a fight, and a fight for democracy, including in New Zealand. And I don't think we should diminish.
Well, you're
how hard
doing it
it's
so.
going to be.
Let me ask Robert. Would you like to chip in for 60 seconds on this? Because I have a little final thing that I want while Sanjana's there. Then Bernard has to do a soliloquy, and we've got a skateboarding dog, and poor old Simon and Bon is thinking, oh my God, these bastards, I'm never going to edit this down to the right. Go ahead, Robert, please.
I think I share Bernard's pessimism, but I think it may be premature. And that, what I mean by that is all the signs are pushing in the very pessimistic direction. But I do think that the impact of Trump and his NS document could provoke a backlash. I mean, Europe could say that's enough and actually make a stand. But secondly, I think the bigger lesson, and by the way, Europe, the reason it was singled out in the NS document is because it's been the only entity, those 27 countries, that have stood up to high-tech giants. And that's why the United States really has it in for Europe, because it actually sees countries pooling their sovereignty through the EU as an effective counterweight to these high-tech, increasingly, sources of right-wing influence. But the second point is, I hope that the NSA, the National Security Strategy document, will serve as a bit of a turning point where people in the media and also in politics realize they can't always split the difference with extremists. And I think that with many politicians, the natural instinct is to be bipartisan and treat Mr. Trump and these right-wing populists like Nigel Farage as if they are just on the other side of the aisle, and that they can compromise with.
And they're
them.
actually outside the church.
Well, they are not prepared to. What Mr. Trump has demonstrated, and I think the Reform Party in Britain will demonstrate, is that their vision is very extreme, and so I do think Mr. Starmer's charm offensive and Mr. Mark Rutte's daddy diplomacy has to be effectively cast aside and a spade has to be called a spade, effectively.
For sure.
Effectively, you know, there has to be frankness.
Yeah.
And
But as Oscar Wilde said, anyone who can call a spade should be compelled to use one. Can I just can you guys stay on for a minute, because and this is, I don't mean to be self-serving, but it fits in with something that Sanjana helped me with recently, and I gave this person the greatest possible courtesy. And Donald Trump said the other day about Sadiq Khan that he was a horrible, vicious, and disgusting person, the mayor of London. When I was in London in 2019 and the Christchurch mosque attacks happened, I was shocked that that person mentioned Sadiq Khan. And I asked William McGimpsey about this. And he said, I would share that view to a certain extent. There is something sort of alienating, demoralizing about being ruled over or having your public officials being foreign people who don't share your basic culture and values in many ways. So that's a problem. I think, for people of different ethnic groups to come to other countries, and over time, over generations, they assimilate to become British or whatever. But that's what we're not having right now. And then I asked him about how long it would take Sadiq Khan to become an English person, which of course he actually is. He said it would take generations to become British, but that's not what we're having right now. We're having a large-scale group. So I hope he's not right, but I want to give him the courtesy of the fact that he at least does it under his own name. But also, one of the reasons that I talked to Sanjana, which people shat on me for, was that Sanjana is, has serious experience in this and does actually take a look. So I really appreciate it. Bernard, you've got to do a soliloquy before these poor kids go home.
Oh yeah, no.
Poor
Firstly,
young men
thank you,
go home.
thank you so much to Sanjana and to Robert for coming on the show and talking about these issues. Unfortunately, we haven't found a solution today. I hope.
Oh,
we
what?
did.
Oh no, next week. Next week we bring the solutions to all the problems. It's going to be
Yeah.
like all the other podcasts. Thank you so
And-
much, Sanjana, and Robert. You're always such a trooper. Thank you.
Much-
And the
much
audience,
appreciated.
a bunch of troopers, except for the person who said, "Why aren't you mentioning the Muslim Brotherhood?" So, can I just tell you to go fuck off on that one? I was
That's-
talking to someone yesterday who I suspect is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is not currently today a show about the Muslim Brotherhood. We'll do that next week. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much to both of you. And
Soliloquy.
it's time for my final soliloquy of
Thanks,
the
Sanjana.
show.
Talk to you later.
Which
See
is
you,
to
Robert.
very briefly
Thanks so much.
Pull together the threads of monetary and fiscal policy outlooks in New Zealand and why it's important for all of us. In this coming week, we're going to have the government's half-year economic and fiscal update, which will give us the latest forecasts on the government's view of the economy and its fiscal outlook. It's likely to show that it's going to take another year, for an extra year, for the government to get back into surplus and to start reducing the debt in a substantial way. In my view, this is a self-defeating strategy of trying to reduce the deficit and the debt, and in effect only contracting the size of the economy and make it even harder to get back into surplus and to reduce the debt. At the same time, it's happening in a counter-cyclical way in combination with the Reserve Bank's monetary policy. So we have the Reserve Bank and the government effectively tightening at the same time through 2024 and 2025, and it's borne out in our stagnant jobs market and economy. We're likely to get numbers next week from the September quarter GDP showing that the economy is growing again, but not enough to really grow jobs. And all of this is happening at the same time as this week the new Reserve Bank governor effectively gave tacit approval to an increase in fixed mortgage rates, as Westpac announced on Monday, and is a reflection of the rise in wholesale interest rates over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And that is a major spanner in the government's works when it has said it's all about growth, and it's all about lower interest rates. We are going into the Christmas break with fixed mortgage rates rising, with a housing market not really taking off in the way the government would like. And it faces some choices early next year about whether it intervenes again in trying to stimulate the housing market. It looks like the Prime Minister's survived through this pre-Christmas period, but the latest poll results show even though the government is in theory on track for a second term, it's not a sure thing. They're not clearly ahead. And actually, there's a fundamental fragility underneath the popularity of the government, and in particular the Prime Minister, who has a net... Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
He has according to the Taxpayers Union Courier poll, which came out last night, the Prime Minister has a net unfavourability rating, which is significantly lower than Chris Hipkins and Winston Peters, and is falling, and is at the lowest level of any first-term Prime Minister ever in the history of Aotearoa.
Which, if he was the chief executive, which he is, he might be fired by the board.
Yes, if you consider that a KPI, and I'm sure the caucus does, he has some answers to provide. He will survive through Christmas, in part because the opposition is not united and parts of it are very weak and weakening.
Bernard, we're getting beyond the parts of it are weak.
Yes.
And
so over to you for the skateboarding dog.
Yeah, okay. So the skateboarding dog, and I do apologise to some of the rather nastier people who appear in our comments. Who
we are coming off YouTube fast.
Yeah.
Peter.
So this week was the first week of the new Pentagon press corps turning up at the Pentagon. So the Washington Post and the New York Times and Reuters and everybody, they've all left, and the New York Times is suing Pete Hegseth. One of the people who's in there is a complete fucking lunatic. Sorry, I think that's now six swear words.
There's a drinking game, and I'm worried about
I do have some coins for my swear box. Laura Loomer, who is one of the nuttiest people you've ever met, is now inside the Pentagon press office, and her press crew office. And she said it's pretty remarkable that the biggest and most advanced ship in the world, the U.S. Navy's great CVN-78, is named after Gerald R. Ford. The Naval Secretary and the Secretary of War should move quickly to ensure that the U.S. Navy's next mega carrier is named the USS Donald Trump. The greatest battleship in the history of mankind should rightfully be named after the greatest president our country has ever known. That's where journalism is going in the United States. Thank you so much, everybody.
Sadly, it is sort of inevitable. There can't be too many presidents who haven't had an aircraft carrier named after them, and simply a matter of time. Even if
Yep, exactly.
I think there is a Richard, or Russian one, a Richard M. Nixon. I think there's bound to be an aircraft carrier called the Richard M. Nixon.
I'll check it out. Bernard, thank you so much, and thank you for your patience and letting me write the script today a little bit, and thank you for everybody who's watched, and poor old Simon as always.
Thank you much, everyone, and come back next week for the last show of 2025. It's going to be a cracker.